Hello, everyone. This is Amy Waninger coming to you with another Lead at Any Level Live. I want to welcome you to the show. The show happens every Monday at noon Eastern, or at least most Mondays at noon Eastern when I'm able to do it. And if you are joining me live, please let me know in the comments where you're coming from. And if you are joining me after the fact, I've got something for you too. So here's what I want to talk about today. Today, we're going to talk about the myth of meritocracy. And the reason I want to talk about this is I was in a room full of CEOs last week, wonderful people, and they had a lot of questions for me about the work that I do and how I might help them. And one of the things that came up, which comes up a lot when I talk to people in leadership, is we don't want to have quotas. We don't want to, you know, decide in advance who we're going to promote in our organization. We just want the best people for the job. And this got me thinking about two things. Number one, what I hear from a lot of people who are looking to get promoted and, who work really hard and can't seem to get ahead. And number two, a lot of leaders who tell me, hey, I just want the best person in the job. And I want to kind of dispel some of the myths around this because I think it's really important, regardless of where you sit in an organization, for you to understand what's really happening here. So let's start with, the myth that just working hard will get you that promotion. And this is something that I hear a lot, especially from women, especially from people from demographics that have been historically excluded in the past. So, Black folks, Brown folks, first generation professionals, um, people with disabilities, people who maybe don't have advanced degrees or, are coming in to an organization in a non-traditional path, right? Maybe they've done a lateral move from another industry, that sort of thing. So if you're not already an insider in your organization, I've got a special piece for you. But if you are already an insider and you're an executive or you're a leader and you're thinking, well, I just want the best person for the job, I need you to hear what I'm going to tell everybody else, and then I need you to hear what I'm going to tell you. And if you're responsible for promoting in your organization, or you know somebody who's responsible for promoting in your organization, somebody who's a hiring manager, an executive, a director, a middle manager, please tag them because I want them to hear this too. This is really important. And it speaks to why the top of organizations often look the same over time, and what we can do to make sure that we are truly getting the best team at the top. So let's talk about that just a little bit. If you're just joining, welcome. We're talking about the myth of meritocracy today, both from an employee perspective and from a leadership perspective. So let's start with employees. Let's say you are a new employee in a company, or you've been there a while and you see other people getting promoted and you're not getting promoted. Or you've been working really hard in your career for a very long time and you are following the mantra of, I just want my hard work to speak for itself. I hear this so much from women, from Black and Brown folks in the workplace. And here's what I want you to know. Your hard work by itself will never, ever, ever be enough. And let me explain why that is. If you are coming into the workforce, if you're coming into a professional environment and all you have is your hard work and your good results, it won't be enough. And here's why. There's somebody sitting next to you. There's somebody in another cube, in another row, in another office, coming in from another company somewhere, who not only works really hard and has great results, but they've also got a ton of social capital. And what I mean by that is maybe they belong to the same country club as the executive in your organization. Maybe they are in the same fraternity or sorority or a part of the same alumni network. Maybe they have some sort of legacy history, right? They have a parent or an uncle who works for the company or used to work for the company, or is sitting on the same board, advisory board, or board of directors with another member of the board of directors or another executive at your firm. And so what happens is, typically I hear people say, well, I don't want to brag about myself, I don't want to advertise, I don't want to build a personal brand in my company, I just want my hard work to speak for itself. But think about that. If it's your hard work and your good results against someone else's hard work, good results, personal connections, family connections, good press, great personal branding, sponsors who are in the executive suite or who are in leadership roles already talking about them. Even if your work compares, right, side by side comparison, you're neck and neck with that person, but they've got all of those other assets working in their favor. They're getting talked about, they're talking about themselves, they're building those relationships inside and outside of work. If all of that stuff's happening for them and all you have is your hard work up against that, you will never, ever, ever get where you want to go because you just don't have enough factors in play. And one of the best books around this, I think, that I've read is Minda Harts' book. It's called The Memo, and it's about how Black women can get a seat at the table. And she really talks about how to build this social capital within your organization. And it's not just a book for Black women, by the way, it's a book for everyone. I've also read books. There's a book called Empowering Yourself, The Corporate Game Revealed, or something to that effect. And it's an older book, but it's about a guy who figured out, right, how to look the part, how to act the part, even though he was an outsider in his organization. One of the stories that he tells in this book, Empowering Yourself, is, and I'll put links in the comments when I get to that part, but one of the stories that he tells is he used to work at IBM, and IBM had a policy of everybody wore the same style of shirt and the same style of pants and the same badge in the same place and had pretty much the same haircut. And the guy who's the author of this book said, I went in there thinking, well, I don't look like anybody else already. I'm Black. I'm the only Black person in my department. I might as well dress the way I want. And his boss brought him in and he said, look, who are you dressing for every day? How often do you look at what you're wearing? And he said, what do you mean? And he said, well, the boss said, well, I see you and I see you trying to be different and I see you not fitting in on purpose, and that's not going to get you where you want to go in this organization. Now, I'm going to caveat that with, this was a long time ago, right? And org cultures have changed since then. But basically, the message was not just about how he was dressed, but he wasn't playing the game of the organization. And if you don't play by the rules of the game, you can't get ahead. Now go back to, what are the rules of the game? Well, it's not just hard work. That's a piece of it. That's table stakes, right? But it's really about not just your hard work, but your executive presence, your social capital, the relationships you have, the relationships with the relationships that you have, right? So where are your second level connections? Who's talking about you? What kind of press are you getting? What kind of trumpet tooting are you doing for yourself? And what are others doing for you? And this is so important if you're trying to get noticed in your company. The bigger the company, the more you need this. So please be aware of that and check out Minda Harts' The Memo if you haven't already. I think she does a really good job of kind of breaking this down. I wish I had had her book when I was still working in corporate. So that's one piece of this. Just understand that, this hard work is important and it's probably what you've been fed your whole life, especially if you don't come from, people who have worked in professional environments, right? If you're first generation in this kind of business. So that's the first piece. The second piece is, I really want to talk to leaders about this, because what you may be missing is you have really hard workers that you've never heard about. You have really competent, capable, innovative, um, effective, efficient people working for you that you may never have heard of or you don't know about because they didn't know that they needed to have that access to you personally. They thought, like you think, that the hard work is enough. But I want you to think about the last few people you've promoted. How did you hear about them initially? Was it because a report landed on your desk about their amazing work? Probably not. It was probably they were networked effectively. Somebody, in a meeting whispered in your ear or said from across the boardroom table, hey, we ought to give this person a chance, right? Maybe, you've got a personal relationship with them, you've had lunch with them, you've played golf with them, whatever the case may be. In addition to that person's hard work, they've crossed a relationship gap with you that got them that seat at the table, probably. You probably didn't just do a blind search, right, with redacted resumes and, some really clear quantitative scoring criteria. There was probably a lot of gut that went into that decision. There was probably a lot of seeing yourself in that person or seeing potential in that person. Well, here's the thing. we tend to tap people on the shoulder who are closest to us geographically, who are the most like us demographically, and with whom we already know a lot about. And so, even though I know you want the best person for the job, the fact is you're selecting from a very limited pool of people who might be the best. And it's because of that social capital piece, because of that um, water cooler talk, because of those relationships. So, my challenge to you, if you're a leader, is to think about what are the last 5 people you promoted have in common? Are they all in the same office? Did they all go to the same school? Do they all belong to the same, um, country club? Do they all have the same history, right, in your company? Do they all come up through the same ranks? Whatever those things are that are similar about the last 5 people is probably what I call a Rocket rule. Now, the Rocket rule, if you don't know, Rockettes have to be a certain height. And the reason Rockettes have to be a certain height is because they want the kick line to be very uniform. And so if they have people who are really tall and people who are really short, the kick line will not look right aesthetically. And so the result of that Rocket rule is, for example, Ginger Rogers, who is maybe one of the most celebrated, um, dancers in America, right, in history, would not have qualified to be a Rockette. Not because she wasn't one of the best dancers, that we've ever seen on stage or on screen, but because she didn't meet the height requirement. Now, the Rockettes have had a lot of other rules as well about people with disabilities, about Black and brown women, about the way women look, about their weight, right? All different kinds of rules about who can be a Rockette, right? Before they will even look at talent. And my guess is in your organization, whether you know it or not, you also have a Rocket rule about where people come from or what you've had to have heard about them or how they need to show up or what they need to look like or what they need to know, before you will even consider whether they have the talent to be promoted, especially into the upper echelons of your organization. So my challenge to you is figure out, if you can, what your Rocket rule is, and then take steps to dismantle that rule. If you can't be explicit about it, you probably need to do away with it. And so if you can't be explicit that these are the guidelines for who we hire, and the last 5 people that we came through all met these guidelines, then you probably ought to reevaluate whether or not those are the right criteria and whether you could maybe start looking outside of those criteria for your next rockstar promotion, rockstar hire. And the reason I say this is because typically we don't see it until we see it, right? It's just the way we do business, right? We just assume that we're making the best decision until we look at things from a slightly different lens. And then we might realize, oh, wait, I was looking at too narrow a pool, or I was handpicking people based on what I'd heard about them, or I was picking people based on who works in my office already, or I was picking people based on who I felt like I had the most in common with, or would want to spend the most time with one on one or in groups. And when we do that, we really miss an opportunity, not just to fill one spot, but to build a well rounded team that will come at us with diverse perspectives, diverse ideas, diverse interpretations of the things that we're doing, so that we can truly make the best decision for as many people as much of the time as possible, which, if you've ever been to one of my seminars, is what I believe leaders should be, what most people believe leaders should be. Not people who make decisions by default without thinking, right? But people who truly make the best decisions for the most people as much of the time as possible. That's the kind of leadership most of us want to follow. And those are the kinds of leaders most of us say we want to be. So here's your chance to dismantle some old prejudices, some old biases, some old patterns of behavior that maybe you didn't realize you were using, that are maybe no longer serving you well. And the reason I want leaders to hear the message for employees and employees to hear the message for leaders is because typically we think it's one or the other and not both. But the fact is, there are things that anyone can be doing in an organization right now to change, to change the makeup, to change the team dynamics, to change who gets considered and why they get considered. And that's what I wanted to bring to you today. So if you're an employee, just know that hard work is not enough. You need a little bit of horn tooting along the way from yourself and from others. You need those relationships. You need that social capital. That's number one. And number two is, if you're a leader, you need to be thinking about whose names do you bring up in a room full of opportunities? Who do you consider? How do you consider them? Who do you rule out and why? And look at the patterns of the past. That those will alert you to some of the maybe some of the decisions you're making without thinking of it, without knowing it, without being conscious, and start to alert you to some ways that you need to expand your own perspective so that you can get a more diverse, um, more represent, more representative, excuse me, team reporting to you, working with you, advising you, and on the lookout for other talent, for other opportunities in the market and beyond. That's all I have for you today. If you would, let me know in the comments if you've ever seen, you don't have to tell me what it is, but if you've ever seen a Rocket Rule in your organization, if you've ever fallen victim to, well, the best person just always gets ahead, so I'm just going to be the best. And if you've ever maybe recognized that you have some work to do in expanding what you see in terms of available talent and letting more people into, in behind the velvet rope, if you will, before you make a selection about who you're going to promote. I hope that you are all having a great week, and you'll want to join me on Thursday. um, the topic will shift just a little bit on Thursday for Including You. It's a video podcast right here, Thursday at noon Eastern, wherever you're viewing this video. It'll also be available after play on YouTube and on my website, and then launched as an audio podcast on Friday through Living Corporate. If you follow Living Corporate Podcast, if you don't already, that now's a good time to do that. My guest this Thursday will be Jorge Quezada. Jorge is the Chief Diversity Officer for Granite Construction. It's one of the largest construction companies in the U.S., and he's going to talk about how Granite Construction is intentional about building a company, um, in new locations and building their workforce so that people feel included and supported wherever they work for Granite. So you'll want to tune into that. Jorge is a leader in this space. He is a phenomenal talent and a phenomenal leader in diversity and inclusion. And you'll want to not miss what he has to say on Thursday at noon Eastern, right here. Join me next week at Monday, noon Eastern, for another episode of Lead at Any Level Live. And if you are struggling with identifying your Rocket Rule in your organization, or you're struggling, to attract, develop, retain, and promote a diverse workforce, I hope that you will consider scheduling some time with me at workwithlaal.com. That's Work with Lead at Any Level, right there. Workwithleadatanylevel.com, or workwithlaal.com. And we can talk about what's working in your organization and what would you like to see improved, and how we at Lead at Any Level can help you get, attract, retain, develop, and promote the kind of talent that you're looking for in your organization, but also keep your employees and keep them engaged right where they are and where they want to be. So that's all I have for you today. I look forward to chatting with you, and I look forward to seeing you all again next week at Monday, noon Eastern. Thank you so much.